Hi guys, hope you all are safe staying home. Let's see about occlusion in complete denture. Here are the contents: definition of occlusion and articulation, difference between artificial and natural teeth, then concepts of occlusion in complete denture, Sears axiom of complete denture, ideal requirements for complete denture occlusion, types of occlusion in complete denture, then most important balanced occlusion, its definition, types, characteristics, concepts of balanced occlusion given by various authors, factors affecting balanced occlusion. Next we have monoplane or non-balanced occlusion, lastly followed by lingualized occlusion. First of all, let's see about occlusion and articulation and what is the difference between them. As per GPT, occlusion deals with the static relationship of the opposing teeth, that is stable relationship which is not undergoing any type of movement. So that is occlusion. Whereas articulation deals with the dynamic relationship of the opposing teeth. So if the jaw or teeth are undergoing any type of movement, in that case whatever the relationship of the teeth is present, that is called as an articulation, like during the chewing of food. So in that case, whatever there would be a relationship of the upper and lower teeth, that would be called an articulation. So the basic things which are to be taken care of in the definition are the term static relationship for occlusion and dynamic relationship for articulation. So that is the basic difference. Next we come on to difference between natural and artificial teeth. So in this case, artificial teeth, we have to consider about the complete dentures. So what are the difference between the natural and artificial teeth are? So first and foremost, we know that natural teeth has a periodontal ligament. So every teeth has its different set of PDL. Whereas in artificial teeth, we don't have any type of periodontal ligament because the patient has lost his or her natural teeth totally. So there is no periodontal ligament in case of artificial teeth. So that is all about the first point. Natural teeth function independently and each individual tooth disperses the occlusal load because of the periodontal ligament, whereas that is not the case in artificial teeth. Similarly, we all know that periodontal ligament has the function of proprioception. So indirectly the natural teeth would be having the proprioceptive impulses because of the PDL, whereas the artificial teeth does not have that mechanism because there are no teeth, and hence as there are no teeth, there is no periodontal ligament. So that is the last point. In the table we can see proprioceptive impulses give feedback to avoid occlusal prematurities in natural teeth, whereas it is absent in the artificial teeth. So the second point in the table, malocclusion can be non-problematic for a long time in natural teeth, whereas it poses immediately drastic problems in the artificial teeth. Next, the non-vertical forces are well tolerated in natural teeth, whereas non-vertical forces damage the supporting tissues in artificial teeth. Next, incising does not affect the posterior teeth, whereas incising will lift the posterior part of the denture. Now for an example, if you bite an apple from your natural teeth from your front area, so if you bite an apple from your incisors, that would not harm your natural posterior teeth. Whereas in case of dentures, if the patient bites an apple from the incisors, in that case that would lift the posterior part of the denture. So incising is not allowed in an artificial teeth, whereas it can be done in the natural teeth. Again, the second molar is the most favored area for the heavy mastication for the natural teeth, whereas if heavy mastication is done in second molar area in artificial teeth, that would tilt or shift the denture base. And lastly, bilateral balance is not necessarily considered in natural teeth, whereas in artificial teeth bilateral balanced occlusion has to be maintained. Next we come on to concepts of occlusion in complete denture. First concept is spherical concept by Monson. In that case, it is similar to that of the spherical theory. We all know that in spherical theory states that it is the curve which travels around all the cusps of the teeth and forms a sphere with 8 inches of diameter and whose center passes through the glabella. Nextly, we have organic concept of occlusion. So organic is something which is natural. So in our oral cavity, the natural things we have is teeth, muscles and joint. So in that case, in patients of complete denture, patients with complete denture, we have lost one natural thing, that is teeth. So we have remaining muscles and joints. So organic concept of occlusion states that when we are rehabilitating a patient with the dentures, that set of teeth should be in harmony with the remaining two natural things, that is muscles and joints during function. So the aim is to relate the occlusal surface of the teeth so that the teeth are in harmony with the muscles and joints during function, and there should be absolutely no interference during any type of movement other than the centric relation. So that is an organic concept of occlusion. So basically organic concept states that anything which is natural has to be preserved, and whatever type of treatment we are giving to the patients, that should be in harmony with the remaining muscles and joints of the oral cavity. Next we move on to the neutrocentric concept. So this neutrocentric concept, it is very much similar to that of monoplane occlusion. In this, the plane of occlusion should be flat, and as the plane of occlusion should be flat, it would be indirectly parallel to the residual alveolar ridge. Now we can see in the figure that the cusps of the teeth, majority of the occlusal surface of the teeth is in contact with the glass slab. So the anatomy of the occlusal surface should be flatter in this case. So these are the three concepts: spherical, organic and neutrocentric. Next we move on to Sears axioms of complete denture. So Sears published the following factors which are to be considered that helps to plan a complete denture occlusion. So first of all, what we have is, Sears has stated that we should keep the occlusal surface of the teeth smaller, because smaller the occlusal surface, lesser would be the occlusal load which would fall on the supporting structures. So that's not necessary that we should keep the occlusal surface similar to that of natural teeth, because our natural teeth are a bit larger than that of our denture teeth. So we should keep the occlusal surface of the denture teeth smaller in order to avoid the excessive load over the supporting structures. Nextly, for proper transmission of vertical forces, we should not have any type of tilted surface. Like if we pass the force over any of the tilted area, the force would not transform into a vertical direction. It would also be inclined or lever force. So vertical forces on tilted occlusal surface will produce a non-vertical force on the denture, whereas vertical forces on tilted tissue support will produce a non-vertical force on the denture base. Third, denture base on the resilient tissues will produce lever forces on the denture, whereas vertical forces outside the ridge crest would produce tipping of the denture bases. So we should take care that there is no occlusal surface which is tilted. As more forces would fall on the tilted area, there would be more non-vertical forces on the supporting ridge, which would lead to ridge resorption. Next we move on to ideal requirements for complete denture occlusion. So first requirement is, there should be stability in every type of centric and eccentric contacts. Next we have tripod contact during eccentric contact. What is tripod contact? Like apart from the centric position, we have different type of movement which patient undergoes, like protrusive movement as well as lateral movement. So in that case, in case of complete dentures, the contact has to be maintained in every type of position, let it be protrusive or lateral. So contact maintained should be minimum a tripod contact. Like if patient is protruding the lower jaw, in that case there should be contact in anterior as well as on posterior in both the sides. So as we have 3 points of contact, it is called as tripod contact. So tripod contact should be maintained during any type of eccentric contact. Eccentric is anything other than centric, let it be protrusive or lateral. Third, there should be no locking or interference of the teeth. Fourth, there should be minimal cuspal height of the teeth. As cuspal height would be minimum, there would be minimal interference or locking of the teeth. So we need minimal cuspal height. Fifth, functional lever balance should be obtained by vertical tooth to ridge crest relationship. When we do the teeth setting of the denture, the teeth should not be more far from the residual ridge, because as the teeth would be farther from the residual ridge, the forces would be more over the ridges. So the teeth as well as ridge should be close enough to avoid the excessive forces. Sixth, there should be incisal clearance during posterior functions. 7, there should be minimal occlusal contact. And 8, there should be adequate cutting, penetrating and shearing efficiency of the teeth. And lastly, teeth should have sharp ridges and cusps for the proper mastication of the food. So in all, let us list the requirements again. Firstly, stability. There should be stability in centric and eccentric contact. Second, there should be tripod contact during eccentric contact. Third, there should be no locking or interference. Fourth, to avoid locking or interference, there should be minimal cusp height. Fifth, adequate distance of the teeth from the residual ridge should be maintained. Sixth, there should be adequate incisal clearance during posterior function. The word function has been missed there, so add it accordingly. Seventh, minimal occlusal contact should be there. Eighth, there should be adequate cutting, penetrating and shearing efficiency. And ninth, there should be sharp ridges and cusps to the teeth for proper chewing of the food. So these are ideal requirements needed. Next, we have types of complete denture occlusion, in which we have 3 types: balanced occlusion, monoplane occlusion and lingualized occlusion. Whereas balanced occlusion is further categorized into unilateral, bilateral and protrusive. So for balanced occlusion, what we prefer is bilateral balanced occlusion. For complete denture, what we prefer is bilateral balanced occlusion. Clear? Move on to the next. So this is the figure just to show you what is a tripod contact actually. So here we can see 4 figures. Figure A is just a centric contacts of all the teeth. Figure B and figure C is the lateral movement, and figure D is the protrusive movement. Now if we see figure B, in case of lateral movement, there is still contact maintained in the molar area. We can see the encircled area in which there is still contact maintained. In figure C, again in case of lateral movement, there is disclusion of the anterior teeth and premolar area, but the contact is still maintained in the molar area. And in figure D, in case of protrusion, there is still contact maintained in the molar area. So the conclusion is, whichever type of movement occurs in the denture, the contact has to be maintained somewhere in the teeth. So that is called as balancing or balanced occlusion. So not even for a moment the teeth should be out of occlusion. Once the teeth are out of occlusion, it would lead to the loss of stability of the dentures. So for this reason, we need to obtain balanced occlusion in complete denture. Nextly, we move on to balanced occlusion. So definition as per GPT, it is the simultaneous contacting of the maxillary and mandibular teeth on right and left in the posterior and anterior occlusal areas in centric and eccentric positions, developed to lessen or limit tipping or rotating of the denture bases in relation to the supporting structures. You can learn the definition by breaking it, like the simultaneous contacting of maxillary and mandibular teeth, first part; right and left, second part; posterior and anterior occlusal areas, third part; centric and eccentric positions, fourth part; lessen or limit tipping or rotating, fifth part; and in relation to the supporting structures, sixth part. So accordingly, you can break the definition and you can remember it. Followed by what is importance of balanced occlusion. The very first important objective is to obtain the denture stability. Whereas absence of occlusal balance, it would result in leverage of the denture during mandibular movement and would lead to loss of stability of the denture bases. So for that reason, we need balanced occlusion in complete denture. Moving on, next we have characteristics of balanced occlusion. So the very basic thing for balanced occlusion is there should be no loss of contact during any type of eccentric movement in the patient's mouth. So this is one basic thing which is to be remembered. So firstly, all the teeth of the working side should glide evenly against the opposing teeth. Working side is if patient is asked to move his or her jaw to the right side, then in this case right side forms the working side, whereas left side forms the balancing side. So whenever patient glides or moves the jaw towards the right side, in that case all the teeth of the right side should glide evenly against the opposing teeth, like upper and lower teeth of the right side should glide against each other evenly. So this is about the first point. Now moving on to third point, see the third point. There should be contacts in balancing side, but they should not interfere with the smooth gliding movements of the working side. Now whenever patient is taking the jaw towards right side, that is working side, in that case the teeth over the balancing side, that is left side, should also glide evenly, but then they should not cause any interference with the smooth gliding movements of the working side. Clear? So in all, the thing is same. There should be smooth gliding movements on working side as well as balancing side, and they should not provide any type of interference to each other. So first and third point is interlinked. Second point is no single tooth should produce any interference or disocclusion of the other teeth. And finally, there should be simultaneous contact during protrusion. So these are the characteristics of balanced occlusion. Nextly, ideal balanced occlusion can be achieved with, now these are the things which are to be taken care of. In which patient we can give balanced occlusion? So patient who has wide and large ridges, then in those cases in which we can place the teeth close to the residual ridge, then teeth slightly lingual to the ridge has to be placed, then teeth should have narrow buccolingual width, then complete dentures that have teeth arranged away from the ridge, and those that rest on the narrow and short ridges will have poor balanced occlusion. As we have already discussed that more the teeth away from the ridge, more would be the non-vertical forces, and more the non-vertical forces, more would be the tipping of the denture base. So we should place the teeth as nearer to the residual ridge as possible, and the ridges should be wide and large, contrary to that of narrow and short ridges. If the ridge is narrow or short, it will have poor balanced occlusion, because wide and large ridges would help in the more load dissipation, whereas narrow and short ridges, they are inherently weaker ridges. So how they are gonna absorb the stresses? Clear? And lastly, the complete denture should be designed in such a way that the forces of occlusion are centered antero-posteriorly in the denture. Next, we move on to concepts of balanced occlusion. We have various concepts. Like first is Guy's concept. What Guy's proposed that we should use only 33 degrees cusp angle teeth, and with that teeth we should obtain the balanced occlusion. This only he said. Next we move on to French concept. What French told that he proposed lowering the lower occlusal plane to increase the stability of the dentures along with the balanced occlusion. Nextly, he suggested that the upper first premolars, that is 4 to teeth number 4, then second premolars, that is teeth number 5, and upper molars, that is teeth number 6 and 7, should carry a specific inclination. We should set the teeth with specific inclination, like 4 should be set with 5 degrees inclination, 5 should be set with 10 degrees inclination, and teeth number 6 and 7 should be set with 15 degrees inclination. So remember, as in teeth number 4, 5, 6 and 7 with 5, 10 and 15 degrees inclination. Third is Sears concept. Sears used the balancing ramps. So in figure, if you can see, in the second figure, the first and second figure, we have an elevation of the acrylic over the retromolar area of the lower denture. So this elevation, it helps in the balancing of the complete denture. So Sears advised that we should provide this ramp in every type of the complete denture to obtain the balancing. Next we have Pleasure's concept, who introduced a pleasure curve or posterior reverse lateral curve to align and arrange the posterior teeth to increase the stability. Next we have Fresh concept. He stated one-dimensional contact relationship which should be reshaped during trying to obtain balanced occlusion. Next we have Hanau's concept, who proposed 9 factors as below: horizontal condylar inclination, compensating curve, protrusive incisal guidance, plane of orientation, buccolingual inclination of tooth axis, sagittal condylar pathway, sagittal incisal guidance, tooth alignment, and relative cusp height. Further, this was shortlisted as Hanau's quint. So, in Hanau's quint, 5 factors were listed, such as condylar guidance, number 1, number 2, incisal guidance, number 3, compensating curves, number 4, relative cusp height, and number 5, plane of orientation of the occlusal plane. Next, we have Traposano's concept. Among 5 factors of Hanau's quint, Traposano concepts only factor number 1, 2, and 4 to be important. So Traposano stated that only condylar guidance, incisal guidance, and cuspal angulation are important. So just to remember, or just to write, you can remember it as 1, 2 ka 4. Number 1, condylar guidance, number 2, incisal guidance, and relative cusp height were considered important by Traposano. Next, Boucher's concept. Boucher he opposed the Traposano concept and explained the importance of 3, 4, 5 factors and their interrelationships. So Boucher basically told Traposano that it's not just first, second, and fourth factor which is important, but also factor number 3, that is compensating curves, and factor number 5, that is plane of orientation, which is important. And Boucher explained its interrelationships to the Traposano about the concept. Next is Lott's concept, who again interrelated the Hanau's quint. Lott he interrelated all the 5 factors and told what is the relationship of the factors and what all effects it causes upon the occlusion on changing them. And lastly, we had Levin's concept, who considered all 4 factors except condylar guidance, because he stated that condylar guidance is a fixed factor, so we cannot change it. So he considered only factor number 2, 3, 4, 5 in order to give an occlusion in the patient. Now, among Hanau's quint, we have first factor as condylar guidance. It is called as first factor of occlusion, which is recorded with the help of the protrusive record of the patient. Now, increase in the condylar guidance will increase the jaw separation during protrusion. As we can see in the figure, as patients protrude the jaw and more the deeper angle of the condylar guidance, more would be the separation of the posterior teeth. So as patient protrudes the jaw, in the figure we can see there is spacing between the posterior teeth, or there is disclusion of the posterior teeth. So this phenomena is called as Christensen's phenomena in natural teeth. Now this we cannot afford in complete denture, because if patient protrudes the jaw and if there is space in the posterior teeth, this would lead to the dislodgement of the denture and stability of the denture would be affected. So because we need balanced occlusion in the complete denture, so we need contact somewhere in the posterior teeth during the protrusion of the jaw. So this phenomena of jaw separation during protrusion is seen in the natural teeth, which is called as Christensen's phenomena. So condylar guidance of any patient cannot be modified because it is fixed. It is inbuilt and inherent. So basically, what is condylar guidance? We can see in the first figure, it is the angle between the horizontal plane and the incline of the fossa. Clear? We can see it in the figure. So this is the horizontal plane and this is the incline of the fossa, and this is the angle. So more the incline, more would be the angle. So this is called as condylar guidance. Next is incisal guidance. It is the influence of contacting surfaces of mandibular and maxillary anterior teeth on mandibular movements. So basically, incisal guidance, it is the angle between palatal incline of maxillary incisor and horizontal plane. As you can see in the figure, more the vertical placement of the maxillary incisor, more would be the incisal guidance angle. In first figure we can see steep one and second is shallow one. In steep one we can observe that maxillary incisor is more vertically placed compared to that of second figure. As it is more vertically placed, the palatal incline is also more vertical. As it is more vertical, the angle is steeper. And as this is less vertical, the angle is shallow. Next, Swenson's formula. Swenson's formula is a formula to calculate the incisal guidance. It is 2 into cusp angle minus average condylar guidance. If we know the cusp angle value and the condylar guidance value, we can calculate an incisal guidance for the patient, and this value we use it while setting the teeth on an articulator. So this is the formula, Swenson's. Incisal guidance is also called as second factor of the occlusion. First is condylar guidance, second is incisal guidance, and incisal guidance is considered to be the most important factor among all 5. Third is plane of occlusion. It is defined as an imaginary surface which is related anatomically to the cranium and which theoretically touches the incisal edges of the incisors and the tips of the occluding surfaces of the posterior teeth. It is not a plane in the true sense of the word, but represents the mean curvature of the surface. Now we all decide the plane of occlusion at the time of jaw relation, right? So it is established anteriorly by the height of the lower canine, because height of the lower canine, it coincides with the angle of the mouth, whereas posteriorly we all know for maxillary we have alatragus line, and for mandibular we consider it the 2/3 of the retromolar pad. And plane of occlusion cannot be altered more than 10 degrees, because if we increase the plane of occlusion more than 10 degrees, the teeth would be more away from the residual ridge. The teeth would go on away from the residual ridge, and as the distance between the teeth and the ridge increases, the forces falling over the supporting structures increases, which leads to the ridge resorption. Next we have compensating curves. Among that we have anteroposterior curve, that is curve of Spee, and lateral curves. Among lateral curves we have Monson curve, anti-Monson curve or Wilson's curve, reverse curve with respect to mandibular posterior teeth, and lastly the pleasure curve. So Wilson curve is something which is seen exclusively for premolars. Now when we do teeth setting, just remember, for maxillary teeth what we check is, for maxillary premolar what we check is the buccal cusp should touch the glass plate. So in that case, if we draw a curve from one premolar of right side to one premolar of the left side, so that would be seen somewhat like this figure. So this figure shows the Wilson's curve for premolars, maxillary as well as mandibular. Moving on to cuspal angulation. To calculate the cuspal angulations, we have Swenson's equation. Now Swenson's equation states that cusp inclination is equal to incisal guidance or incisal inclination plus half of the difference between condylar guidance and incisal guidance. Now the most important thing, factors governing the balanced occlusion and their interrelationship. Now there is a equation called as Thielman's equation. Now Thielman's equation states that condylar guidance is inversely proportional to incisal guidance, whereas other 3 factors are directly proportional to condylar guidance and inversely proportional to incisal guidance. Now what are 5 factors of balanced occlusion we have? Condylar guidance, incisal guidance, cuspal angulation, plane of occlusion, and compensating curves. So these are the 5 factors. Among that, the condylar guidance and incisal guidance are inversely proportional always. Now, for example, if we have condylar guidance deeper or steep, then we need to reduce the incisal guidance, or vice versa. If we have shallow condylar guidance, then we need to increase the incisal guidance. Clear? Whereas the relationship of the other factors with condylar guidance and incisal guidance are as follows. The condylar guidance is directly proportional to factor number 3, 4 and 5, whereas incisal guidance is inversely proportional to factors number 3, 4 and 5. Clear? Let us see the figure. In first figure we have condylar guidance which is steeper. So according to first statement, which is written below, condylar guidance is inversely proportional to incisal guidance. So accordingly, if we have steeper condylar guidance, the incisal guidance should be reduced. And according to second statement, all other 3 factors are directly proportional to condylar guidance. This means that if the condylar guidance is steeper, then the cuspal angulation should be increased, plane of occlusion should be increased, and compensating curves should be again deeper. So these 3 factors are directly proportional to condylar guidance and inversely proportional to incisal guidance. Now logically, if we think, just imagine if the condylar guidance is deeper, so as we protrude the jaw, there would be more separation between the posterior teeth. So we need to have the contact between the posterior teeth. So as there would be more separation between the posterior teeth, we need to increase the cusp height, plane of occlusion, and we need to make the compensating curves deeper to obtain the contact between the maxillary and mandibular teeth. So this is shown itself in the first column. I hope you're getting the thing. Similarly, if we go on to the second case, in second case we have shallow condylar guidance. Now if the condylar guidance is shallow, we need to increase the incisal guidance, because in this case, suppose if we reduce the incisal guidance, there would be interlocking between the posterior teeth. There would be no opening of the posterior teeth. So as there would be interlocking, this would lead to interference, and if this would lead to interference, this would lead to loss of stability of the denture. And as we also know that condylar guidance is inversely proportional to incisal guidance. So if condylar guidance is shallow, then incisal guidance should be increased. Accordingly, we also know that condylar guidance is directly proportional to the other 3 factors. So in second figure, condylar guidance is shallow. So as it is directly proportional to other 3 factors, the other 3 factors should also be decreased. You're getting? Hope it's clear. You can think it seeing in the figure. Next, third case is if there is steep condylar guidance with steep incisal guidance. Now in many cases, if the condylar guidance is steeper, in some cases, because of aesthetics or functional point of view, we cannot decrease the incisal guidance to some extent. So in that case, if we need to keep steep incisal guidance, then we need to increase the all 3 other factors. The phenomena is same. These are if condylar guidance in this case is steeper. So as we know that condylar guidance is directly proportional to the other 3 factors, we need to increase other 3 factors also. Whereas in second case, condylar guidance is shallow. So as condylar guidance is shallow, we need to decrease other 3 factors also. So to summarize the thing, read the below 2 statements. If both condylar guidance and incisal guidance are steeper, like first column, this is steeper and this is also steeper. so other three factors has to be increased. If these both are steeper, then other three factors has to be increased. Whereas if condylar guidance and incisal guidance is shallower, in that case other three factors are also made to be shallow. Clear? Hope you are getting the thing. You should see it like 2-3 times, then you would get the thing. Moving on to next, after balanced occlusion we have monoplane or non-balanced occlusion. In that we have 5 concepts like Pound's concept, Sears concept, cusp form gold occlusal concept, Kurtz's concept, and Philip Jones concept. And lastly we have lingualized occlusion. It was proposed by Alfred Geisy in 1927. It involves the use of large upper palatal cusp against a wide lower central fossa. In this case, the only the maxillary palatal cusp are in contact with the mandibular teeth, whereas no cusp of the mandibular teeth is in contact. And next, there is Merson's lingualized integration. Merson proposed specialized tooth molds for arranging teeth in lingualized occlusion. So he proposed 2 different types of mold. First is control contact mold and second is maximum contact mold. So maximum contact mold has taller cusp teeth with a more anatomical appearance. As the name suggests, if it is maximum contact, so for maximum contact we need taller cusp and more anatomic teeth. Whereas for control contact, the cusp would be shorter and the teeth would not carry more anatomical appearance. So these are control contact and maximum contact. Hope you liked the topic and it would clear your doubts. Thank you all. All the very best. Study hard. Goodbye.